guys, so I'm finally back with a new video. Today I kind of want to give you guys a summary of my school experience because I know having a disability, a lot of people assume that you shouldn't go to public schools or that it makes it harder, and I'll be honest, it does. It makes it probably 1,000 times harder. So all through up until right after middle school, so my freshman year of high school, all through there I went to school. I had 2 to 3 aides trained at all times, but I had 2 to 3 aides trained at all times on how to handle me and I've seen you. How to handle me and kind of like worst case scenarios on what to do if I break or if I get sick or choking, because that was a factor for a while, that I was the worst at chewing food properly, and I would choke sometimes. And the school really did give my parents a hard time on getting me an aide and keeping it consistent throughout school. At one point, I remember when I was little, I was pulled out of school, and my mom did kind of I don't remember if it was homebound or what it was, but I was pulled out until the school board could reach an agreement on giving me the proper aids and medical care that I needed. Because at first they refused to, even with doctor notes. The other big issue with public school is they want you to be there every single day, mainly for funding purposes.
And it sucks, because I don't go now.
But mainly it's for funding reasons. If you have an IEP and go to regular classes, like I did with an aide, then they get a little more of a kickback. That was very well known in our public school systems. I don't know if it's that way across like all of the United States or whatever, but I know in our school that's how it was. And so with me, I know I at least have 50-something trips to Vanderbilt a year. And when I was little, it was even worse because I also had, back then, 3-day infusions, and it was every 6 weeks instead of 10, like it is now. So I missed quite a bit of school. And at one point, that was a very big issue for them. They weren't willing to accept it. And it's not one of those things that I could help. At one point, I was being hospitalized for at least a week. Once a year due to my respiratory issues. And so a lot of it became a lot of issues. Now, we did work through those, and I stayed in public schools, mainly for the social aspect. When I was 3 or so, I just kind of didn't want to talk to anyone. Everyone scared me. Kind of everything scared me. I was a very anxious child. It's even noted in my charts medically that I had anxiety from a very young age, which is really funny to me to see. But I would literally either shut down or scream if someone tried to talk to me. So it was pushed for me to go to preschool for that reason, just to kind of get me out of that bubble that I was used to, and so that way my brain would realize not everyone that was coming near me was a medical person. Because that was a big issue, where I had been around medical teams so much, I just didn't like people, which is kind of a thing, But after all those issues kind of got worked out, it was kind of easier. I didn't change aides every single year. Sometimes it was just dependent on if I was transitioning into a new school, because the way our schools is broken up, it's every 2 years throughout elementary school. You change to a different school. What is it? Every 2 years?
3.
So it's every 2 to 3 years.
2. I don't know.
It's either every 2 years or every 2 to 3 years that you change to a different building. Unfortunately, ours isn't set up so you go straight through like one elementary school. You have, I think it's 3 elementary schools here, and then a middle school and a high school. So unfortunately, every 2 years I was changing aides. Most of the time the aides didn't want to transition with me, so that required another 4 to 6 weeks of training again that my mom would do. Thankfully, she would come in. Now, by about middle school, I didn't really like that. Um, you become a teenager, you kind of want that independence. At high school was really the point where I cut off aides completely. I got very lucky, and the aide that I had in middle school kind of followed me to high school. Only one of them. I had two main aides in middle school. One of them decided to stay behind like normal, and then the secondary one, she came with me, which I am very appreciative of. And she's like family, which is really funny because she had the same last name as us too. So Miss Teresa was definitely my favorite aide. Um, one of them. I did have several other good ones, but there was a few that were just issues, and aides were not the best. And hello, Belle, you're all in the shot. Yep, everyone's gonna see a Belle. High school was kind of that point where I got to make a lot of my own decisions. And at high school freshman year, a lot of things happened, and I ended up transitioning to living with my dad, and he gave me a lot of freedoms to make a lot of school choices on my own. At that time, thankfully, Miss Tracy came with me so she could do any training that I needed. But I made the choice after freshman year that, well, I think it's actually the end of freshman year, that I just didn't want aides. It became, they were trying to stick me with different people or older people that were very kind of clingy or checked on me too much. And being in high school, you don't want that. Your friends are definitely not all about that. I was also transitioning to a different circle of friends who weren't used to that. I had that whole elementary group of friends that kind of transitioned with me, and they were used to it. But then as I transitioned to other friends, they kind of didn't understand the aspect of having aides, which it's hard to get used to. And I made the choice not to have one. My friends were very big helps. They would do what I needed. They would help me get from one class to another instead of having to have an aide there. Because mainly my aide was there for safety reasons, to get me from one class to another safely, and to get any supplies that I needed, or writing longer assignments.
The shadow behind you is bugging me.
Right now, all I see is her tail. It's kind of funny.
The shadow's bugging me. But I'm not moving those lights. They're too bright.
But the aides kind of became pointless there at the end. I still had Miss Teresa if I needed her, and for kind of transitioning from a chair and bathroom needs and stuff like that. But as far as like a permanent in class all the time aide, I decided I didn't need that. And then turns out on, like, I want to say like right at the start of my sophomore year, I ended up fracturing my left femur pretty severely, and I had to be put on homebound. And there's a Bella tail over here. I had to be put on homebound and kind of do the bed rest thing, and I did it for most of sophomore year. But we found out that for health reasons, it was actually easier for me to stay on homebound. And the school at that point had gotten back into this habit of making a really big deal out of me not being there every single day. It got to the point where one of the ladies that was overhead of the special ed department actually kind of embarrassed me in front of a lot of people, called me out on how much school I missed. And it's not like I missed on purpose. I was missing for health reasons. I had doctor's notes. And she still made such a big deal out of it in front of people, in front of one of my aides. And so, my dad handled that the way he had to. But it just got to the point where my anxiety couldn't handle that either. And so I talked to my doctor, and we came together and agreed on that. Homebound would be the best option for me. Of course, then I kind of get back into this bubble, and anxiety and depression kind of sets in. But you learn how to deal with that. And I was still getting out. I still went to prom 2 of my 4 years, and I still had friends that, kind of met me outside of the school setting. So, freshman year and all of high school, I didn't have a typical high school experience. Now, experiences are kind of what you make them, and I went when I wanted to, which was a good thing about Homebound. If I felt healthy enough, and if I knew that tons of germs weren't going around, then I would go.
I don't do that.
I would go. I would go for main things like homecomings and things like that, and I would go for major what we call like mandatory testings, which don't even get me started on that.
Those are annoying.
And I was definitely the art student too, so I didn't particularly like the classes, so I wasn't the best student there was. And so Homebound was just a very fitting thing for me. Now, the thing that I get asked the most, if you could go back and choose to do only homeschooled or only homebound versus public schools, would you change it? And I kind of have to say no. I do see where I was coming from when I was little and needed that socialization. And I'm not the only kid that happens to. You can get kids out and do activities with them, but even then it's easy to fall in that bubble and get into a routine of doing schoolwork at home and not getting out as much. And so some kids just need that socialization aspect. And I was one of those kids, I just did a lot better if I was around kids and I didn't fall into that bubble, which also affect my anxiety and depression. And even now I'm kind of that way. Now, would I say I made the wrong choice when I was in high school to choose to not go the typical route? A lot of people call it hack schooling, what I did, where I kind of chose what I learned. And while I was doing core subjects, I was also learning like real world stuff. So in that aspect, I don't think I would change it. I learned a lot of business stuff. I learned a lot of people skills. I got to do things that high schoolers, when they were going regular 8 to 3 o'clock classes, couldn't do. So I don't think I would change how I did my schooling. Now, looking at how public schools are today, would I still make those choices if I had to do it again in today's teaching aspects? I don't know. Schools change every couple years. They change a lot. And would I say they're changing for the better? Some are, but ours currently is not. There's a lot that I would change. There's a lot that's happening that parents don't particularly see in a school setting. The one thing that a lot of people didn't see was when I was transitioning from one group of friends to another, that was hard. One group kind of completely cuts you out, the other ones kind of don't accept you as well as others. And so the part that parents don't see is the bullying, the fights, the just mean kids. Teenagers can be mean. And I think in a digital world like we're in now, it's only going to get worse. It makes it so much easier for people to type what they want. And
So vulnerable.
But it makes it easier for people to type what they want and not think about the people on the other side and how it's going to affect them. That kind of happened to a girl that I went to school with. And I wasn't close to her, but that was awful. So I don't know. I always look at it as there's good and bad in everything. And I think schooling is another one of those things. And I think if your kid is old enough or mature enough to make that decision, then talk to them. Let them see what they are actually feeling. Because a lot of kids nowadays will tell you on what's going on in school if you have a open relationship with them. And for some kids, schooling is just isn't their thing. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Me.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, it should be case by case basis. But I don't think a school should make you feel bad for having health problems and getting treatment for those or needing sick days out. Not to the extent that I was going through. So I think it really varies. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on schooling and what you did and maybe what you're doing for your kids now. Because I know it changes a lot. I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave this video, though. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next video. Bye.